So today's program is entitled Stories in Song by Miss V, the Gypsy Cowbelle. And she hails from a musical family with a love of classic country and has been a performing artist for more than 20 years. Her music reflects the folk process of learning by those whose paths she has crossed. Through this process and her song, she shares American history and culture nationwide with audiences of all ages. She is a South Dakota Humanities Council Speakers Bureau Scholar and helps others create their own instruments and music through interactive workshops. She's from the metropolis of Thermopolis, right? Did I get that right?
Very good, yeah.
Thermopolis, Wyoming. She does have CDs for sale. If you're interested, she'll be selling those after her talk, or well, her performance. So please help me welcome Miss V.
Yay! Thank you, Christy.
Jump off the stage and get out of your way.
Gosh, I forgot to leave time in my between songs for all the applause. You know, you have to factor that into the time.
Come on.
Yay! Come on in. All right. Well, I'm delighted to be here. It's always such a pleasure to come to South Dakota, and I've been happily working with the South Dakota Humanities Council for quite a few years now. So I always want to thank them for inviting out-of-state artists to be part of their programming. So I consider it good luck to start out with this old song. It was the first song I ever remember hearing or learning. My dad used to come into my first grade class and sing this song, and us kids would go wild in the chorus. And so a little early in the morning to be singing, I thought this would be a good chance to warm my voice up. It's an old Hank Williams tune. Goodbye, Joe, me gotta go, me oh my oh. Me gotta go pull the pirogue down the bayou. My Yvonne, the sweetest one, me oh my oh. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Jambalaya and a crawfish pie, filet gumbo. Oh, tonight I'm gonna see Mama Charles meal. A big guitar, a filled fruit jar, and big ale. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Depot, the fountain, oh, the place is buzzing. Kinfolk come to see Yvonne by the dozen. They dress in style and they go hog wild, me oh my oh. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Jambalaya and a crawfish pie, filet gumbo. Oh, tonight I'm gonna see my Matrels a meal. A big guitar, a filled fruit jar, and big ale. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Settle down far from town, buy me a pirogue. I'm gonna catch me all the fish in the bayou. Swap my moan to buy Yvonne what you need, oh. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. A jambalaya and a crawfish pie, filet gumbo. Oh, tonight I'm gonna see Mama Trails a meal. A big guitar, a filled fruit jar, and big ale. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. The one and only Hank Williams. Thank you so much. Hank just would have celebrated his 100th birthday last week, and fortunate to be in a place with people who enjoyed his music and at a remote ranch out in Wyoming, and listened to his music all day long. So I thought I have two sets today, and I thought I'd sort of do a little bit of a theme with both. I'm going to make this one into my heroes theme and the second one into my modern day homesteader theme. But I'm going to do a little bit of crossover because one of my heroes is the main character in my modern day homesteader program, and that's a fellow named Snook Moore. And the ranch I was just talking about up the head of the Green River in northwest Wyoming was the first place I went to back in 1995 when I moved out to Wyoming. And I worked there as a functional dude ranch, and shortly after their season ended, I learned about the neighbors that were 10 miles over. And just to put some perspective, this is hundreds of thousands of acres of National Forest Service land. But before the National Forest Service was created, there were a few little homesteads that were scattered around this vast mountain area in the Gros Ventre Mountains. And so one of those homesteads was created by this Snook Moore back in the 1930s. And the neat thing about Snook and his wife Evelyn was as the world modernized around them, they just chose to live their whole lives as they had back in the 1930s. So when I showed up there, I heard they needed a winter caretaker, so I sort of skied over from the one ranch 10 miles over the hill to this other homestead ranch, and never left for like 14 years. But when I got there, they were still feeding with horses, and were putting up the hay with horses, and never did have any plumbing or electricity on the place. So anyway, it was one of the formative experiences of my life, and I'd like to share that story as part of this Heroes session. So for Snook Moore and the last of his dying breed, this is a modern day homesteader. Well, the guys down at the tavern are all bragging on their digs, wearing Carhartt soaked in oil from working on them rigs. He's still wearing worn out boots and patched up homemade clothes, punching cattle, growing hay, and reaping what he sows. His friends bought him a cell phone, but he's never made a call. When it rings, he hollers telephone and looks over at the wall. There's buttons, lights, and buzzers, and a fear in his eyes, 'cause he never understood how a voice moves through the sky. He's a modern day homesteader living in a Walmart world. His neighbors cook with microwaves, but he's still burning wood. He hunts, he traps, he works the land he proved up on years ago. And he's never joined the rat race, 'cause his horses are too slow. He has driven the same truck now for over 40 years, but he tends to harness up a team if he's turning any gears. If he has some news to tell or an itch to spin a yarn, he'd rather take his saddler and park it in the barn. He likes his plumbing outside with his outhouse and a creek. He had a light plant once, but it lasted just a week. 'Cause he don't savvy gasoline or engines with a whine. He's never had high voltage, but he seems to do just fine. He looks around his land at the logs that he had stacked, at the posts that he had pounded and had sharpened with his axe, at the sagebrush creeping back into the fields he grubbed by hand, and the washed out ditches he had dug to irrigate his land. Every notch in every cabin that was scattered on that land, and every piece of furniture was hewn by his hands. The neighbors talk about him, think the place looks too run down, and he never knows or cares about it 'cause he never goes to town. He's a modern day homesteader, he never made the switch. His neighbors all bought tractors, he still drives his 4-horse hitch. He hunts, he traps, he works the land he proved up on years ago. And he's never joined the rat race, 'cause his horses are too slow. But up there in the mountains, the weather it is rough. The years have taken their toll upon him, and getting around is tough. So the young now gather round him to hear the tales he tells of a way of life forgotten and the one he knows so well. This way of life forgotten is the one he knows so well. Thank you. Small but mighty. I like it. Thank you. All right, this next song is going to take us to Savannah, Georgia. And back in 2009, I had the good fortune of working on a movie there called The Conspirator. And while I was there, I learned the story of Florence Martis, our next heroine of this set. Miss Martis was born in 1868 and lived on the tiny Elba Island at the mouth of the Savannah River, where it empties into the Atlantic in North Georgia. And do you know the story? Okay. So Florence began the interesting habit at the age of 18. I don't know if I mentioned her brother was a lighthouse keeper on this little Elba Island. And at the age of 18, she started waving to every ship that came and left from that port, which in itself wasn't all that interesting. But the unique thing about her was that she kept this tradition up for 44 years. They say she never did miss a ship. And no one ever quite knew why she was waving to all these sailors, but they thought perhaps she had met a sailor and fallen in love and was waiting for him to return. So anyway, her story became known throughout all the maritime communities around the world, and all the sailors would look forward to her greeting when they sailed into that port. So for Florence Martis, this is The Waving Girl. From the wide Atlantic Ocean to the North Georgia Sea, I sailed in through a storm that almost ruined me. Then I caught a glimpse of a dim and distant light. 'Twas the light that saved my life from that cold November night. When at last I saw the lighthouse and the shadows of the land, I saw a tiny figure with a white scarf in her hand. Her cheeks were red and fair, and a gentle smile she wore, waving to me gaily from the Fort Pulaski shore. I sailed away from Georgia, looking o'er the stern, waving to Miss Martis with a promise to return. She swore to keep a watch, waiting for the day she'd wave to me again from that North Georgia bay. A kerchief by the day and a lantern by night, every passing sailor was greeted by that sight. So the story was told all around the world about the port of old Savannah and the little waving girl. Now I wonder if she knows as she waits along the shore, the one for whom she waits will travel nevermore. For more than 40 years she dreamed of his return, waiting and watching and waving for him. A kerchief by the day and a lantern by night, Every passing sailor was greeted by that sight. So the story was told all around the world about the port of old Savannah and the little waving girl. Thank you. All right, well, while we're in the mode of female heroines, I'd like to do another one from that same era. This next gal is actually a local legend. We don't know a whole lot about her. We know she was born somewhere around 1850, somewhere in the state of Missouri, and that her parents brought her out to the Western Plains and then passed away, leaving her to care for herself and her numerous siblings. And as a way of making ends meet, she found work at all the burgeoning railroad towns around Wyoming and South Dakota, and ended up spending a lot of time right here in Deadwood. So we know she worked as a scout for wagon trains. We know she worked as a laundress and had a big heart taking care of a lot of the victims of smallpox when no one else would dare. We know she had a propensity to find where the action was and live life to the fullest. Beyond that, it's hard to know for sure what's fact and what's fiction, but she was born Martha Canary, and the whole world knows her as Calamity Jane. Oh, Calamity Jane, she lived up to her name. She was a wildcat woman on the western plain. She had quite a name, she put on quite a show, doing her best in a wild, wild west on the trail down to Buffalo. Her mama pushed a needle through the clothes that she wore. With that fiery hair, she knew just where to find an open door. But her mama passed away, and her daddy soon was gone, and our dear Miss Canary was left out on the prairie on the trail down to Buffalo. Well, she drank a little whiskey, she smoked a few cigars. She was scouting trails and following the rails and camped beneath the stars. With her arm she swung the picks, with her hand she held the lines, laying ties with all the guys until the quitting time. She was laying ties with all the guys until the quitting time. Oh, Calamity Jane, she lived up to her name. She was a wildcat woman on the western plain. She had quite a name, she put on quite a show, doing her best in a wild, wild west on the trail down to Buffalo. When her finger hit the trigger, the hammer split the gun. With no alibi for truth or lie, she wrote down what she'd done and made a line up for a picture or the signing of a name of that heroine who just rode in and goes by Calamity Jane. Now there's a heroine who just rode in and she goes by Calamity Jane. Oh, Calamity Jane, she lived up to her name. She was a wildcat woman on the western plain. Her name became a legend, etched upon Boot Hill, with old Deadwood Dick and Wild Bill Hick and good old Buffalo Bill. In a time that is gone, the taming of the West, she was a little wild but had lots of style, and she traveled with the best. She was a little wild but had lots of style, and she traveled with the best. Calamity Jane, thank you. Let's hear it from Mac saving the day. Thanks, Mac, for the sound system. Yay. I started making these homemade banjos, so when I couldn't get my banjo tuned, I'd have an excuse. I was caretaking that homestead ranch I was talking about up in northwest Wyoming, and had been wanting to make an instrument that was lighter weight that I could travel with, and somebody said they had heard you could make a banjo out of a plank of wood and a coffee can. And there wasn't a whole lot of excess lumber on that place, but there was exactly one plank of wood, and we had lots and lots of coffee cans. And I actually had a collection of deer hides that I was trying to learn how to tan. And so one winter I decided I would try to make a banjo, and I made one, and it played just well enough to inspire me to keep making them. And I just sort of stuck with it for quite a few years and ended up with this, this model, this design. This is about number 38, so it took me quite a while to get here. But the basic design has stayed the same. And I haven't seen too many like it, but I did come across one that was pretty similar, visiting another one of my heroes down in Deep Gap, North Carolina, a fellow named Doc Watson, who I'm sure you know about. And I was turned on to Doc's music at this old ranch. There's two ranches. There's a really antiquated homestead ranch where I was caretaker, but then there's a more functioning dude ranch from the same era that actually had a hydroelectric system and some power. And so I would clean the lodge, and there's an old cassette tape of Doc Watson, and I just was like, whoa, this guy is something else. So I subsequently made some trips down to North Carolina and was fortunate enough to meet Doc on a couple different occasions, and went to a little museum. They were just starting back then, and helped volunteer to get that going. And as one of their collections was a banjo that looked a lot like this. So I'm going to play a song that I learned off that cassette tape back in the early days, 1995, when I moved out to Wyoming, and dedicate this one to Doc Watson. Well, it was late last night when Willie came home. I heard him rapping on the door. He's a slipping and a sliding, got them new shoes on. Papa said, Willie, don't you rap no more. Way downtown I was fooling around. It took me to the jail. Now it's all me and it's all mine. Ain't got no one to go my bail. This one old shirt is about all I got, and $1 is all that I crave. 'Cause I brought nothing with me into this old world, ain't gonna take nothing to my grave. Way downtown I was fooling around, it took me to the jail. Now it's all me and it's all mine, ain't got no one to go my bail. I wished I had a needle and some thread as fine as I could sew. I'd sew my one true love up onto my back. Down the road I'd go. Way downtown I was fooling around. It took me to the jail. Now it's all me and it's all mine. Ain't got no one to go my bail. Ain't got no one to go my bail. All right, Doc Watson. It's pretty handy how that PA picked up right for the breaks. It's like I couldn't have planned it so well. All right, I'm going to do another cover song here, but I want to pay tribute to a dear friend of mine, Liz Masterson, one of my mentors. And Liz was, I think of her as a cowgirl singer that sort of bridged the gap between the old, early silver screen cowboy and cowgirl singers and the modern Western music that we listen to today. She mentored with Patsy Montana, who was the first woman to sell over 1 million records back in 1939 with her hit, I Want to Be a Cowboy's Sweetheart. And I'm not going to do that song. But Liz was recording her last CD down in Denver, and I was visiting her and was in the studio with her when she was doing this song, and I couldn't believe I had never learned it because it reminded me of a cabin that I lived in for a lot of years. But anyway, this was written as a poem by South Dakota's own O.E. Miller, Oliver Edwin Miller, I believe was his name. Back before South Dakota was a state, when it was the Dakota Territories, he moved out in 1880 to what is now the Lower Brule Indian Reservation, and proved up on a claim, homestead claim there, and wrote this poem about his property. And it was shortly thereafter put to an old fiddle tune by the name of Little Old Log Cabin Down the Lane. But true to the state, his poem was Little Old Sod Shanty on My Claim. And let's see, I think I got this in the wrong key. So anyway, dedicate this to the great state of South Dakota, Oliver Edwin Murray, and my dear friend Liz Masterson. I'm looking rather seedy now while holding down my claim, though my victuals are not always served the best. And the mice play shyly around me as I nestle down to sleep in that little old sod shanty in the west. Oh, the hinges are of leather and the windows have no glass. The board roof lets the howling blizzards in. There's a hungry old coyote out a-sneaking through the grass round that little old sod shanty on my claim. Howdy-o-de-lay-de-o-de-lo, ooh-dee-ay, de-lo, yeah, I rather like the novelty of living in this way, though my bill of fare is always rather tame. I'm a happy as a clam on this land of Uncle Sam, in that little old sod shanty on my claim. Oh, when I left my eastern home, a bachelorette so gay, to try to win my way to wealth and fame, I little thought that I'd come down to burning twisted hay in that little old sod shanty on my claim. Howdy-o-de-lay-de-o-de-lo, ooh-dee-ay, my face is plastered o'er with dough, I'm looking like a fright. Everything is scattered around the room, but I wouldn't trade the freedom that I have out in the west for the table of an eastern mansion home. Oh, the hinges are of leather and the windows have no glass. The board roof lets the howling blizzards in. That hungry old coyote in me will stay through thick and thin round that little old sod shanty on my claim. Howdy-o-de-lo, de-o-de-lo, ooh-dee-ay, de-lo, ooh-dee-ha. Thank you. All right, I think I'm gonna do one now from my home state of Wyoming. This hero is of the equine nature, and he had his heyday back in the early days of rodeo, back at the turn of the 20th century, the first rodeo that ever was, Cheyenne Frontier days. And he became so famous that he's still seen today all over the Wyoming license plates and flags and the state logo, which we all think of as the bucking horse. And his name was Steamboat, but he was such a noble creature. The cowboys in those days said he was just a pleasure to handle on the ground. And for this, they called him Lord of the Plains. But once they lifted the blinds and he unleashed his hurricane deck, which was a horse's particular style of bucking, they said he was really beyond compare. And back then, of course, there was no 8-second rule for rodeos, so cowboys had to ride him to a standstill in order to win the event. And it's not that no one ever rode him, but very few ever did. And anyway, very legendary character, and I chose to honor his more reputable name, so I call this one Lord of the Plains. Many have loved and dove in the dirt. Many have torn the brave cowboy shirt. They've twisted and spun and made such a show, cheered on by the fans of Big Rodeo. A few are remembered through songs that are sung, like Strawberry Roan and the Old Zebra Dun. But when asked, the cowboys agree to this day which one was the wildest, they all have to say. He's that mighty black cayuse with 3 ivory feet, half trapped in blood and incredibly sleek. He's gallant, he's bold, and he's perfectly formed, and his hurricane deck is the wildest of storms. Lord of the Plains is a title he earned with a singular style that few ever learned. His showman-like flair as unique as his pitch, his fury unwound with the spur and the switch. Though awful indeed were his leaps and his thrust, sun-fishing and twisting like good broncos must, what the riders feared the most of this colt was how he would land with that back-breaking jolt. And the cowboy who rode this horse to a stand would surely be named the best in the land. But less than a dozen could make such a claim. Steamboat's the outlaw that never was tamed. His whistling blow earned him his name. His fiery spirit earned him his fame. A state that's known for freedom and rogue claims this hero so few ever rode. And now 100 years later he still kicks his heels on t-shirts and flags and automobiles. He's a symbol of freedom that makes the land great. Steamboat's a champion of the cowboy state, forever remembered with his heels in the air. He graces the grounds of the old Cheyenne Fair, the place where cowboys came to behold this ebony horse of whom legends are told. He's that mighty black cayuse with 3 ivory feet, half trapped in blood and incredibly sleek. He's gallant, he's bold, and he's perfectly formed, and his hurricane deck is the wildest of storms. Lord of the Plains. Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, I think I have time for just one more song here. And again, I want to thank the South Dakota Humanities Council for adding this program to the book festival here. It's my first time at the Festival of Books, I guess is the correct name. And I'm just delighted, honored to be here. I'm traveling on this afternoon to Aberdeen. I've got another show over there, but I've got one more set coming up from, I think it's 12 12:45 to 1:30, I believe. So, and I'll have almost all different songs for that if you're inclined to stick around. Thank you, Deb, for being here. Thank you, Christy. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks again, Mac, for and Jake. Am I saying it right, Jake? Yay, Jake. And to the small and mighty crowd, thank you for listening in here. I'm going to close it up with one last wonderful hero that means so much to me. One of the programs I offer through the Speakers Bureau is my Dawn in the Night program, where I, of all things, portray Amelia Earhart. You can tell the resemblance. She'd be close to 100 years old also. Anyway, I had the great fortune to work with the Meeteetse Museums in Wyoming, which is a place where Amelia stayed in 1934. And when they do a tour up to that ranch every year and come to the cabin where Amelia stayed, and out comes Amelia Earhart. So in addition to being the first woman to cross the Atlantic as a passenger back in 1928, she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic solo in 1932, the first person, man or woman, to cross the Pacific from Hawaii to Oakland in 1935, set all sorts of speed and altitude records, other firsts, flying from Mexico City up to New York. The list goes on until she finally, her luck ran out and she disappeared while attempting to circumnavigate the globe, approximating the equator, back in 1937, just 2 weeks before her 40th birthday. So in my program, I really like to talk more about who she was as a person. She was a great philanthropist and a woman so far ahead of her time. And I think a lot of times we get caught up in wondering what happened to Amelia instead of paying attention to what she did during her life. So because she was ahead of her time, I call her Anthem Dawn in the Night. Ooh. A faraway sound is heard in the night. The wings on the wind flew in with the light. Patrons and saints bowed to their knees, but the smile on her face had put them at ease. A leader in courage, a leader in flight, ahead of her time, a dawn in the night. A dove from the west delivers a note. With tales from abroad, the fair maiden spoke. Fly with me across the great sea, follow me and ride on the breeze. Life is for living and flying's for fun, and you might see the light in the rising sun. Oh, the wings are her wind and also her voice. She might think of landing, but she has not the choice. For the one ring she longs to place on her hand is the one that circles all of the land. The higher you climb, the faster you fly. The steeper the mountain, the harder you try. Alone with the sun, there's no one to blame. The shorter the candle, the longer the flame. Fly with me across the great sea, follow me and ride on the breeze. Life is for living and flying's for fun, and you might see the light in the rising sun. Shattered by silence, the ocean is near. Is it the end or the failure you fear? Your smile betrays no hint of surprise. The wind and the wings would be your demise. Now the spark of your life and the loft of your dreams are lost in the waves, or so it may seem. But Amelia Earhart, angel of light, freedom and courage remain in your light. Fly with me across the great sea, follow me and ride on the breeze. Life is for living and flying's for fun, and you might see the light in the rising sun. I saw the light in the rising sun. I saw the light in the rising sun. Thank you so very much. I'm Miss V, the Gypsy Cowbelle. Thank you.